I guess there's a lot of people that think I'm half a bubble off. This is just proof that that's not true. All right, so what you're looking at is a level across the rear cross member in the Cuda. There's the shock cross member 2. Okay, I got that in there for spacing. It's not even tacked in, it's just sitting in there and kind of clamped in. You can see you got both frame rails in the car. All right, and there's only one place those frame rails go. I mean, they got to sit in the cradles. Other things I did, if I don't kill myself here, up in the front, I put another level between those holes there. All right, got that bubble. And then I did one across the door sills and a couple other places to make sure that this thing was level. Okay, leveled the cross member out. One side was hanging a little bit low. I mean, just because of variances in how they're constructed. So put my hydraulic ram and got it to the right height. And then ran some pretty decent tacks on both sides. So they're pretty much fairly welded in at the top. If I needed to, you know, I could pull those back out, just do a little cutting on them there, and they would come back out. But at this point, I'm not planning on doing that anymore. So I think the next thing that's going to have to be done is kind of take those clamps out and then start working the floor back down and screwing that in with some sheet metal screws. And then I'll end up putting the trunk floor in all the way back to the back, kind of reconstructing things and make sure they're going to screw into or fit into the right places before I start doing any more welding on the frame rails. Okay, so there's where I am today. Here we are underneath the Cuda. You can see that got the frame rail set in, got some of the plugs, you know, plug welding done. They're ugly, but stable. So got that going on. You can see my bubble here, a little bit high on the right side or low on the left side, but that's going to be taken care of when I reset the side. The left side, I'll pump it up just a little bit, and then put in the trunk floor. And so the trunk floor gets welded along this flange right there, right? And then you drill holes along the frame rails and weld it into the floor. So the floor ends up being a stress member on the top of the frame rail, basically. And we'll pull that frame rail up slightly along the way. So, well within what you'd call, excuse the noise, factory tolerances, but I'll make it as good as I can. There's an interior shot going back with all the plug welds in the floor pan. All that's gonna have to be ground down. I mean, I guess it really doesn't. If I wanted to, I could just cover it up with seam sealer, and then there'll probably be carpet over that. But being as anal retentive as I am, I'll probably ground them down at least a little bit and make them look nice. Those stabilizer bars that come across from the sides, I still have not welded those back on. So I got to do some cleaning up where I painted those with Pour 15 before I start doing plug welds on those. But I do want to set those back in pretty quick, like, because again, this is all stability of the car. It's like I don't know, origami or something. You know, it's folded in a certain way that it makes everything stable. It's tacked in a certain way, so that's where the stability of a unibody comes from. To go along with that, here is the trunk pan that I've been prepping. So It's got well-through primer on both sides. All the edges are, the E-coat's ground off and all that good stuff. It's upside down right now, but the other side looks the same. I'll put that all back in, screw it together with sheet metal screws, make sure my level's good, and then start tacking it in. Okay, got a little progress. Got her back together. The back part here, still with sheet metal screws. If you see, I've had to drill like 3 or 4 different places trying to get everything fitting correctly. You know, we fit it up without the frame rails. It all flexes. You got to refit it up with the frame rails. It's just part of life. Just weld them up and be done with it. There is the trunk pan and the drop-offs over there, which I've gotten pretty even. That one's a little low right up in the corner. And I got to tell you, those were a little bit of a pain in the butt because, you know, the whole flexible flyer concept, the cars, they just, you know, until they're folded into their final shape, they don't give very well. So I would say a porta power is a must if you're going to do anything like this. I had the porta power up underneath the car, pushing on the fender well, because I knew from pre-fitting it together that the trunk drop-offs were pretty much in the right place. So I went ahead and I welded them. And I didn't do like the factory and just spot weld. I mean, I welded the snot out of them. And I'll also tell you that doing welding in your garage, the power source is just crap. So some of the welds look worse than they usually would. Anywho, I was having to use the porta power to push on the inside of the fender well from the wheel down here where this suspension point is, you know, where you roll it around and do all that stuff. So I had to put it on there and brace it against the back of that wheel well and push out to get the trunk drop off, the inner portion of it to come up where it was fairly even. And then you're pushing down like mad with somebody on the inside with the trunk corner right there. Okay, pushing down and then clamp it, and then I welded it, you know, 3 or 4 spots down the seam. I don't give a rat's if that's what the factory did or not. It works like a champ. Besides that, with putting an IRS on this thing, I'm going to be welding a lot of the seams that the factory didn't, because you got a lot of flex. You need to take as much of that out as you can. It's cage is a must as far as I'm concerned. Probably 8 points. We'll see as that goes. Anyway, all that's in. The frame rails are just sheet metal screwed in from the bottom, but I am happy with how everything fits. So that's what I got. Yeah, if you want to see up under here, I better bring the light with me, huh? Can't really see much, I guess. Anyway, pretty happy. All right, more as I get it done. Getting there on getting the welding done, frame rails, etc. You can see on my truck drop off over there, I've welded probably a lot more than the factory does. And then it'll be welded on the bottom too. When the factory does stuff, you know, everything they do is up to production standards, of course. My welds may or may not be. So more might be a little better in my case, maybe for you too. Especially if you're not worried about originality. The other thing is the factory's always doing stuff with an eye toward cost. So they're trying to spit them out as quick as they can. So maybe they don't want to take, you know, the time to weld all the seams. I'm not going to weld every seam in the car fully, but I will put a lot more weld in the seams than the factory did. And then if I ever have to replace anything, it's on me anyway. What do you care? Up in the trunk, you can see both spots and stitches, top and bottom, up at the front of the trunk floor. As I stated before, this thing, it's built like, kind of like monocoque airplanes are built. So it's all about how the metal is folded and the fact that some of the sheet metal is a stressed member. Anyway, preparation, welding parts of the frame rails in here. You can see I got the E-coat ground off. I use a Unibit, which you all know looks like, hate when that happens. Looks like that, right? Probably go up to about between the second and the third little notch for sure. I don't know the sizes, I just know what looks right. So I go to, do that, drill normal holes, kind of widen it out with the Unibit, and then put the plug welds in from there. Other things that you want to do to make sure that this is stable, like sometimes it won't be great contact between your trunk floor and the flange underneath on the frame rails. The frame rails, they come to you, the flanges may be bent a little bit. You need to hammer those as flat as you can, and then what you can do is take something like, whatever you got, and when you tack, go ahead and put the hammer, the back of the handle on it, push down for your first tack before you do the whole plug weld. Okay, so that's probably not a bad idea. Things that I kind of been looking at have to do with all these deals, right? So that is the part that goes on the very edge of the rear cross member. The rear cross member on the 70, as far as I can tell, looks like it ought to have that little flange on the end facing toward the outside. And then when I got these, both this flange and this one here were not bent enough. They weren't bent at 90s. So you're going to have to rebend those to make them work out for you. And then they fit in pretty easy. So they'll go on the edges right there. And if I remember correctly, that's the one for the other side. Then you got these deals. These go up in this edge. The flange, the long piece here, fits up right in that part of the quarter panel. So I'll show you that more as I go. So a million to go here, but your plug welds look somewhat similar to that. Finally got my welder running like I'd like to. The ones up on the kind of kick up pan in there, they were not to my liking, but these are okay. Regardless, the ones inside are going to hold just fine. It's just I was having issues with the circuit that the welder was on. So spit some blobs out. So I'll grind that down and it'll be under the floor pan. Don't get too excited.